Hi, I'm going to show you how to compute customer lifetime value in a Python fashion. So there's many different ways we can compute customer lifetime value. However, I'm using the calculation average order value times purchase frequency divided by the churn rate. And then once we had that, we want to multiply it by the profit margin. So that's a lot of information, but I'll take you through it step by step. So let's see what our agenda is. We're going to prepare the data with customer grouping. We're going to get elements of our calculation, which we defined here. And then we're going to put the equation together and get our results. So let's dive in. So the first thing we want to do is prepare the data. So let me take you through that. We imported pandas as PD. We imported warnings. And then we use filter warnings ignore because I don't want to constantly see the warnings. They're not harmful. They're just letting you know that there may be some packages out of date or there's some small conflicts. I read in the CSV, which is located on my GitHub. It's an e-commerce data set, and we can take a look at it. So you can see we have an unnamed column, which we need to get rid of, invoice number, stock code, description, quantity, unit price, customer ID, country, date, and hour. But what you see what we're lacking is we don't have a revenue column, which we need to create. So let's do some small data wrangling tasks. So we create our total revenue with our bracket notation. We bring in the quantity and the unit price column. We multiply those two to get our total revenue column. We drop that unnamed column and specified the axis for the column and made sure that was saved in place. We ensured that the date was a date time by just using the pandas variable and then the toDateTime function. We then made sure that we didn't have any quantities in our data set of 0 because that's not going to help with our calculation. And then we look at the head of our data. And you can see we have a clean data set and we have our total revenue column. So let's group our data. You can see what I've done here is I've ensured that we had a max date and that the max date exists on the data set. So you could use today, but this data set stops on 12/9/2011. So I just used that max date. And then we created a grouping and I called it data frame 2. I used group by, I grouped over the customer ID. I used the aggregation function and then I passed in lambda. You could possibly try to do this in a different way, but this was the most efficient way. So I wanted to get the min and max date to get the total age of the customer, days to get the number of days. And that's because we created that date time variable previously. I got the length of the invoices according to those customer IDs. So that tells me how many times they purchased. Then we got the quantity that which we use as a sum. And we summed up all of their purchases. And then we got the total revenue, which we also summed. And what we end up with is this data frame 2 variable. And this is what you look at. You have your date, your invoice number, your quantity, and your total revenue, all grouped by that customer ID. So the max date here, I just kind of double checked. You can see it here. Now, we have all this together in a data frame, but I thought it was better just to take the same information and put it together in a function. So you can see, I call it the customer model, same information here, and it just returns a data set. So I created our data just by passing in that function and using our original data frame, and what we end up is what we saw before. Once we have our data, we can change the names of the columns. And you can see what we have is our data columns. I used age, number of transactions, quantity, and total revenue. And then again, I made sure there were no quantities there with 0. We shouldn't have that issue. Let's take a quick look at the head of our data. So if I do dataset.head, and let me run this from the top. So I'm going to run all just in case it wasn't run properly. Let me go back up. And you can see what we end up with here is our age, number of transactions, and the total revenue. Now let's work on getting the elements of our customer lifetime value calculation. So first I wanted to create an average order value because that was part of our calculations, and that was just the total revenue divided by the number of transactions. And then what we have is this AOV column. Then I wanted to get the purchase frequency, which I needed to get the sum of all the transactions. So this is over our whole data frame because we want to be able to apply this as a aspect of our total population. So I summed all the transaction numbers, and then I took the length of the data. You could use shape, and this would give us the purchase frequency, which is 19.49 across all our different customer IDs. Next, I wanted to get the repeat rate. And the way we got the repeat rate, we just looked at the number of transactions that were greater than 1. And then I used shape to get the rows. So if you don't know, if we look at the shape of data, so I'll show you a quick. So data frame.shape. And you can see we get this tuple. And then we can say this is how many of our individual rows, and these are the columns. So what I want to do is take out just that one value, which would be the rows. So we can just easily do that by using shape and bringing in the repeat rate. So we have a 92.9% repeat rate, and we can get a churn rate just by subtracting 1 from that. So our churn rate is about 7%. Next, we take our profit margin. So we create a new column called profit margin, and then we multiply how much we think we're going to get as a profit margin. Now, I just chose 10%. However, you may have different specifications, and maybe 3%, 10%. And then what we will end up with is our data here. So if I run that, you can see our profit margin is a percentage of the total revenue. So finally, let's put that equation together. We can put the equation together to get customer lifetime value, which is just what we had specified. We take the average order value times the purchase frequency divided by the churn rate and multiply that by our profit margin, which we said was 10%. And then we get this customer lifetime value for all our customer IDs. The next thing, I just did some summary statistics, which I said the median customer lifetime value is $460. The average is 747 based on our data set. However, our data set has a lot of outliers. So you can see at the customer lifetime value here, even at the age of the customer being 156 days, you can see the value is quite low because they have low purchases. So we can see the customer lifetime value here is really large because of the amount of money that this particular person purchased at because of the huge average order value. So The next step would be to segment this and identify the customers that you find that are important and group them and segment them. If you have any questions or ideas how to improve this, please leave your comments and suggestions below. Thank you.